12 years ago, we bought the house next door. This is how the backyard looked about 10 years ago. A blank slate, approximately 50 by 50 square feet, faces north, but has sun all day. I wanted to design a garden to complement the 100-year-old house and to grow fruits and vegetables. Christopher Lloyd defines cottage gardens as an orderly planned garden containing fruits, vegetables, and flowers. This is the first center bed that we dug. It's the anchor bed for the whole plan. A garden critic came over and said, "Oh, what an odd-shaped bed." I told him it's a maze for the directionally challenged. You see, it's best to keep the critics at bay when you're starting a new garden. I chose a native redbud for the center specimen tree, a small tree whose roots grow straight down, an important consideration when planting a tree in the middle of a flower bed. For some time I had wanted to grow dwarf fruit trees, and this garden with its full sun and shelter from the wind seemed to be the perfect place. The hedge and the fence provide a wonderful windbreak to the 10 fruit trees we planted. We planted 6 pear trees and 4 apple trees. This is our Bartlett pear tree. Dwarf fruit trees bear fruit within 1 or 2 years of planting and need a certain amount of cold days in the winter to bloom. Pears do well in New England. This is a shekel pear tree. Our next project was to build this entry trellis. Old New England houses have high foundations, and we built this to tie the garden to the high back porch on the house. This is the view from the back of the garden looking toward the house through the trellis. The trellis is planted with roses, Arctic kiwi, and ivy. Sometimes the best of plans go awry. Where are the critics when you need them? And this stone checkerboard pattern in the center of our garden was ill-conceived for the very reason that we can't grow really good grass here. This was as good as the checkerboard ever looked, and by the end of the season it was pretty dreadful. So our next plan and project was to build a new deck. The new deck draws you to the very center of the garden, the heart of the garden, to sit amongst the fruit trees and shrubs and flowers, and the redbud had grown up enough to provide shade in the afternoon. The garden was designed with 4-foot grass paths around the center square for easy access of wheelbarrows and lawnmowers. The path allows enough room to work in the outer borders. It also makes a nice place for visitors to stroll and see different views of the garden. This is the back grass path near the fence. It leads to the vegetable beds which run the length of the garage. These are the shrubs that are planted along the back fence of the garden. They include holly, 9-bark, butterfly bushes, and rose of Sharon. This is the grass path running along one side of the garden. You see our raised beds with the vegetable garden, and the center garden has a little entrance there to the deck. I used the slate squares from the checkerboard fiasco to make these little paths. It's nice to be able to repurpose the stone. This is the grass path on the far side near the hedges with its row of fruit trees on each side. This photo was taken last May, probably one of the more recent photos we have of the garden. you can see how tall the trees have grown. The grass paths around the garden are an integral part of the plan, tying the whole garden together. I wanted to plant a small hedge around the inner garden, boxwood being my first choice, but it could not survive the winter in a north-facing garden, and pruning hedges is not one of my favorite chores. I chose sedum, autumn joy. It requires little care, looks good all season, and is easy to propagate. All the sedum in this garden came from one plant. The sedum hedge comes into full bloom in September and is truly a wonderful end-of-the-season sight, swarming with hundreds of bees and butterflies. I leave the sedum standing all winter because it looks beautiful with snow on it. I cut it down in early spring and we start all over again. Here's our deck late last summer with some potted cannas. You can see how big the redbud has grown. When you're sitting on the deck looking through the trellis, this is the view of the back porch of the house. This is the view from my house next door, looking across at the cottage garden, pretty much filled in after 8 years. My husband built all the structures in this garden. This is a tool shed and bench he designed. He also rebuilt the porch with a storage area underneath. And here, once again, is the before picture. And 10 years later, standing in the same spot, is the after picture, our cottage garden.